My name is Phillip Maas. I'm a research associate at the University of Leipzig in Germany. I had visiting professorships at the University of Munich and Halle, and I was assistant professor at the University of Vienna. And before I was a research associate at the University of Bonn in Germany. So I have a quite extensive academic career. I am here at the World Sanskrit Conference because I enjoyed World Sanskrit Conferences. I find the idea of bringing together experts from different cultural and academic backgrounds together to jointly discuss ancient Indian literature, culture, grammar, fascinating. I find it very, very valuable that such a platform exists in an academic setting. And I've attended numerous World Sanskrit conferences, starting with the World Sanskrit Conference in Helsinki in 2003. It was my first World Sanskrit Conference, and I presented my dissertation there, and the contacts that I made then brought me my first appointment as a research associate for the Austrian Academy of Sciences. So yeah, on very many levels, these World Sanskrit conferences are useful, and they were always nice experiences. And I hope that to make such an experiences here, and up to now, it's exactly what I expected with regard to reconnecting to old friends, colleagues, people that I haven't seen for 10 years or longer, I meet again, and that's very valuable. And it's also an important aspect of these huge international conferences that as an Indologist, one works frequently in isolation, in your home office, on your own desk. And these huge international conferences, they give you the opportunity to see that you're not alone with what you're doing, that there is value, that other people are also interested in your work. And yeah, this is one of the reasons why I'm here. Yeah. Conferences, yeah, it started in Helsinki, then we had Edinburgh, then there was Kyoto, then there was, I was in Bangkok, then Vancouver. I participated online in Canberra. So it's my 7th World Sanskrit Conference, I would say, if I have not forgotten anything. But I think it's 7. Yeah.
So how has
the conference? There were serious communicational problems, I have to say, that had not occurred earlier. I also have to be a little bit critical with regard to how the academic aspect of this conference was handled. I'm the convener for the section on yoga and Ayurveda. I reviewed the papers, submitted them for my decision, and it was completely ignored, for example. Now, this is not the way one should deal with the expertise of international scholars. That's, I think, an experience other people have also made. So in the preparation to this conference, I think some mistakes have been made that should not reoccur. Otherwise, I see what is happening here is very nice, very friendly, very nice hosting, very friendly people, good venue, excellent catering, food. So the organization now is really, really good. But yeah, initially, also the postponement of the conference, if you look critically at how many people are here, you will see that there are less people from Europe than in previous conferences. There are very few people from the US coming. We know that we are in a difficult political situation. We know that there were difficulties with air travel, but I think this is only one of the reasons why some people withdrew, although they had already registered for the conference. So a little bit of critical re-examination in the aftermath of this conference, I think, is urgently needed. It's a long story, and it's a complicated story in many respects, but also a story of coincidences, luck, privilege. So encountered Sanskrit literature in German translation from an English translation when I went to school. I found at a friend's home, I don't know how this book ended up with him, a German translation of Shankaracharya's Vivekachudamani, Pseudo Shankara's Vivekachudamani, and I read this book and I was fascinated by Advaita Vedanta. At that time, I was maybe 17 years old at that time. It really changed my perspective, increased my interest in philosophy. Yeah, then I started to read around, to read more about India, get an idea of what there is. Started to read some philosophical literature in translation, the Bhagavad Gita, Ramayana, other texts. And at one point there was the decision to be made about the academic subject that I would want to study, and I thought it would be valuable to go into something that really interests me, not to pursue a subject for just earning money, like law or financial economy or something like this. And yeah, my parents were lenient enough to say, okay, we support you with this. If this is your wish, you can do it. It was also a time in Germany when there was a lot of optimism with regard to the future. So it was clear that if this path would not work out, then I could do something different. I was very much convinced that there was basically no risk and a lot to gain. So I went to the University of Bonn, which was nearby. It was the oldest university in Germany, the oldest chair. And yeah, I was quite proud that I had read something. And then I realized very quickly that Indology is completely different from what I had been doing, and that all I thought that I would be knowing was basically nothing. And what followed was a very strict philological curriculum with regard to yeah, Sanskrit grammar and other languages like Pali, Tibetan. So it was really demanding. And yeah, when I had pursued this, after my graduation, my MA studies, I was offered a position at the institute. So that was lucky. I continued. Then I could continue to my PhD. After my PhD, I got an offer to work for the Austrian Academy of Sciences on the Charaka Samhita. Then I had the privilege and the chance to work on the critical edition, to go to Vienna as an assistant professor. And afterwards, then I was lucky enough to serve as a visiting professor and as a research associate. So there was this sequence of lucky incidents that whenever I needed something came up, so I could continue with my studies. Yeah, this is why I'm here today. Yeah. The monistic perspective and the idea that behind the world of experience, there could be a higher reality that is approachable in some way or other. So that really appealed very much to me as a young person, to find something to aspire for, to get this kind of connection to the transcendent reality and a path offered in this direction. So I think it had something to do with philosophical and religious longing that many young people have, and that brought me onto this path. But yeah, what was required at the university was something completely different. It was critical thinking. It was learning about the structure of language, yeah, philological expertise, learning different scripts, learning different languages, seeing historical developments in early South Asia. And yeah, that in the end fascinated me even more than this initial enthusiasm that I had at that time. So, yeah. The subjects of my study. So yoga came to me from a conscious choice. When I was at the University of Vienna, there was at the University of Bonn, there was the time that I had to look for a subject for my MA thesis. And I was trained in Buddhist studies and in Tibetan literature. And my supervisor suggested me that I should work on the techniques that the Tibetan translators used to translate Indic text into Tibetan. And although I found this interesting, I remembered that I had come to the university with a different purpose. I wanted to know more about Indian philosophy, yoga, spirituality, and then I decided to do an MA thesis on Patanjali yoga, actually, and wanted to work on the Yoga Sutra. Then I realized that this is a very difficult text, and I looked for commentaries, and I found the so-called Vyasa Bhashya, which is still very difficult. And then I looked for more commentaries, and I discovered the probably oldest commentary, the Patanjali Yoga Shastra Vivarana. And there I saw that this author of the Vivarana, that he's commenting upon a completely different text than we have it in the modern printed editions of the Vyasa Bhashya. And that raised my interest in where does this text come from? Do we have manuscripts that still preserve this text? Is it just a local variety, or is it a more ancient version? Is it more authentic? Is the text that we are reading in the print edition corrupted? So I had to take a step backwards after my PhD, which was on yoga philosophy and yoga psychology, towards philological work on manuscripts. And this was the reason why I undertook a critical edition of the Patanjali Yoga Shastra, first chapter, based on 25 manuscripts from different parts of India, some of them also coming from Nepal, and 21 printed editions. So there was 6 years of intensive work with manuscripts, and I presented the results at the World Sanskrit Conference in Helsinki. And at that time, another editorial project had taken off at the University of Vienna, which dealt with the Charaka Samhita, Ayurveda. And this project was looking for support. And so I received an offer to join this project after my PhD. And this is the reason why I then turned to my research in Ayurveda, also coming from a philological perspective, working on the Charaka Samhita, not so much as a source for medical knowledge, but as a mirror of the cultural and intellectual history of early classical India. Very, very interesting text in this regard, a fusion of different worldviews under the umbrella of healing and Ayurveda. So that was really fascinating. Sankhya came very naturally because the Patanjali Yoga Shastra is a Sankhya text. It's on the background of Sankhya, and it calls itself a Sankhya Pravachana, so authoritative explanation of Sankhya philosophy. So I had to work on Sankhya. And my work on Nyaya, that was the result of a job offering that I received after I had to leave the position in Vienna because the time of appointment ran out, and I received the offer to work on the Nyaya Bhashya. So this is what I took. So I have these Shastras as at the center of my research, and what connects them is the work with the manuscripts. And as I already indicated, manuscripts and texts change over time. When manuscripts are copied and recopied, texts change, either consciously or unconsciously. And I think it's a very valuable enterprise to try to reconstruct how a text may have looked like at an early stage of its transmission, and how it then changed in different versions, and how the interpretation of the text changed over time. So this is all interrelated. And work on the manuscript is a very fundamental work. It's very, very tough, very exhausting, but I think it's also very valuable because it provides solid basis for what follows in the future. And I think there's no way around this. The manuscript sources need to be addressed especially if we look at what are the sources for the printed editions that we have nowadays. Most of the texts were edited at the beginning of the 20th century on the basis of just a few Devanagari manuscripts that were easily available for print. People wanted to print quickly Sanskrit literature, so they went to manuscript libraries, took the manuscript that were very nicely legible, correct some obvious mistakes, and then they were printed. And this is the foundation of the academic subject of Indology, and it's not satisfactory. Nobody actually then took the trouble to look into what different versions of texts have to say. And that's not only the case for Patanjali Yoga or Nyaya or Sankhya, or it's the case for all the literature that we have. And very, very little work has been done in this regard. And it's a pity that this foundational textual work doesn't get more support, because there's an urgent need for this. I'm convinced, yeah. Nepalese manuscripts, and Nepalese manuscripts are quite diverse. Now we have modern paper manuscripts in Devanagari script or modern Nepali script, and we have more ancient manuscripts written in different East Indian varieties of Devanagari script. So yeah, it's very diverse phenomenon. But what is unique about Nepal are the climatic conditions of Nepal, which have enabled the preservation of manuscripts for a long time. In subcontinental South Asia, in India, manuscripts usually don't survive for longer than 300 to 400 years, so they need to be copied and recopied. And in Nepal, we have the unique situation that we have manuscripts that are 1,000 years old or even older. So we have a direct access to a very early stage of transmission. And this is particularly true for Dhammaputrika Samhita, work on which I work recently, quite little known yoga work. And we have several manuscripts that are dated to the 11th century. And then from there, we can go back in time. And that's really amazing and wonderful. And yeah, they are beautifully written and nicely preserved. So it's a pleasure to work on Nepalese manuscripts. Yeah. Sure, mostly wet and hot climate, which leads to the deterioration of manuscripts and palm leaf very quickly. So drier conditions are definitely suitable for the preservations of manuscripts. So what are the oldest Nepalese manuscripts? There's an article by a colleague of mine, Kengo Harimoto, who worked for the Nepal German manuscript cataloging project. And he said it's an easy question with a complicated answer. And he came up with different possibilities for the most ancient manuscript. I think it's clear what is the most ancient manuscript, because some manuscripts are dated by a year. Then you know the year, but you don't know the era of whether it's Vikrama or Shaka or Nepal Samvat. So there are different possibilities how to locate this concrete year in time. But you may also have fuller amount of information, namely the month, the tithi, and the weekday. And if you have all this information, you can clearly say when a manuscript was written. And we have manuscripts from the 9th century and maybe even from the 8th century in Nepal, if I'm not. The 9th century, I think, is possibly the earliest, and then 10th, 11th century. These are ancient manuscripts that we have. We have a very old fragment of the Nyaya Bhashya preserved here in Nepal, but these are only some stray leaves. We have absolute fascinating ancient version of the Sushruta Samhita. It's an ancient Ayurvedic text, and if you compare the Nepalese version of this text with other versions that are current in printed editions, you see that it's much shorter and a huge amount of textual variation. So the Nepalese manuscripts may really help to reconstruct a better version of this. My friend and colleague Dominik Vujastik is working on this with his team. So that's for the history of medicine, the Sushruta Samhita is fundamental importance. It's one of the great classics of ancient medicine, even not only for South Asia, but for world history. So that will provide a new picture on how the Sushruta Samhita may have looked back more than 1,000 years ago. Yeah, so the Dharmaputrika Samhita, on which I'm working with my colleague Christelle Barois, is a very unique text on yoga that is, in many respects, is completely different from anything else that I have been reading about yoga. So it may show us something about where yoga actually comes from and how it developed as the Shastra. It's a very vernacular text, which means it's a very non-standard Sanskrit, even in its oldest reconstructible version. So that's fascinating. Yeah, Nepal has a unique cultural heritage, and generations of researchers could work on this, and I hope that really that this will happen, and that this treasure will be seen and will be preserved and worked upon for following generations. I'm not an expert on Nepal. I have to say in Nepali culture, but I think it's commonly known that there is a strong connection to Sanskrit learning in Nepal, coming from two major traditions, Hindu tradition and Buddhist tradition, with unique cultural fusions in the Kathmandu Valley. So it's an important area of research, which also deserves more attention internationally than it may receive, actually. So, very, very long story that I try to make short, give an overview. I think the source of interest in India, in Germany, is connected to searches for supplementation, traditions of self-questioning of one's own tradition, the discovery of ancient traditions of India in the 18th century already, and that India was used then to find arguments to question and to enrich one's own tradition in different intellectual contexts. Enlightenment, deism played a role, the Romantic movement played a role. And so there was a kind of thrill, public thrill, about that there is another culture and another high culture, not only the European tradition, but there are also other traditions that may be even older and that they may have something to say and to contribute to the development of a kind of world culture. And this initial enthusiasm then led to the development of Indology as an academic discipline. But in this context, the parameters have completely changed. It became a very rational, philologically orientated, historical discipline, trying to produce knowledge that has a strong foundation. So kind of what should I say, irony in the history of research also, no? That in the beginning there was this huge emotional appeal for India, and then it became very focused, very minute, and I think German philology developed very, very strong results over a long period of time. And the history of the Nepal German Manuscript Preservation Project, I think, which started in the 70s of the last century, by German Indologists who knew that there are unique manuscript sources here. And there was a contract then made between the Nepal, the Kingdom of Nepal, and the German government that manuscripts in Nepal were photographed. It all started in the Kathmandu Valley, but then there were expeditions with mobile photographers, and I think Albrecht Wetzler, he estimated that 70 to 80% of the manuscripts of Nepal were photographed in the context of this project. So, yeah, it was a huge achievement. The producers of the microfilm had promised that the microfilm would, of which there are copies here in Kathmandu and in Berlin, that it would exist for at least 200 years. Then it turned out that it's much more short-lived. So we are now facing the challenge of digitizing the materials that were produced. Also, funding was withdrawn from the German side at one point for reasons that I do not understand, actually. The cataloging stopped. So, yeah, it's also a difficult story. And it is to be hoped that this treasure that was produced there is preserved and made available for future studies. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and yeah, on the when you ask me about your questions, the question that you were asking now started with stating that I'm a German Indologist, yeah, and that provided the bridge for talking about German Indology. So I have never identified myself very much with my Germanness. I think Indology should be an international enterprise. I was, of course, raised and educated in the European intellectual environment, so I would rather identify myself as a European Indologist rather than a specifically German Indologist. Yeah. I was very optimistic throughout my academic life that finally there will be a realization that in India we have or South Asia, we have a cultural heritage that is comparable to the Western tradition. In many respects, may have been even superior with regard to grammatical analysis and in other respects, philosophical reflection, and that there would be a genuine interest also from the European side to enrich their own tradition by more concrete knowledge about foreign cultures. This optimism has suffered a little bit in recent years, I have to say. Numerous chairs for Indology in Europe and specifically in Germany have been closed down. There is a certain disregard for text-based scholarship. It's all more theory-based. Expertise is going down in this regard. It's also becoming more difficult to educate the young scholars properly. Today I saw a keynote speech about Indology or Sanskrit studies in China, which was a lot about memorizing text and training young people philologically in classical languages by making them memorize huge amounts of literature. In this regard is also to educate people in critical thinking and in historical thinking, and not just educating them in admiration of the tradition. So we need critical engagement with traditions to preserve liberal, open societies. So this is the role that Indology has to play in modern secular democratic societies. They provide or should provide the framework for the flourishing of Indology, and Indology then gives the society search results and arguments to conquer claims for people who make unfounded claims on their own traditions, like Ayurveda is 6,000 years old, or there was no historical development in India. So all these things can only be refuted on the basis of research, historical and philological research. And this is needed, and I don't know whether there will be a turn towards critical thinking again in the nearer future, or whether this was just an episode in the history of thought of the humanity. Yeah, I don't know. Critical, stay awake, read, think about what you're reading, think about the arguments that are made, question the results that are presented to you, irrespective of whether they come from a spiritual background or they come from researchers. Everything can be questions and need to be questioned, and that makes yourself better person, and a person who's able to navigate their life more responsibly. Yeah, that's my message.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,